Hello! Today, here we are with another interesting side of minimalism, kind of a neglected side of minimalism, and that is how to stay minimal while you are traveling. There are a lot of videos on how to pack the minimal amount of clothing and how to declutter your stuff so that you can fit everything into a suitcase so that you can travel around the world and find yourself and stuff like that. I don't think a lot of people talk about what happens when you are actually traveling. So after you have decluttered, after you have a minimal amount of stuff, then there is a huge temptation to go out and buy a lot of stuff. The reason why I thought about this is because everyone seems to be traveling right now. All of my friends. I think that we are approaching the end of university and everyone is starting to earn a little bit of money and everyone seems to be spending it on traveling for the reason of finding yourself to be a complete nomad, to be free. So there is this common idea about travel is that when you are traveling you become a nomad, this adventurous romantic idea of travel. So this sounds to me like the perception of travel is kind of like a big minimalism workshop. The more you are traveling, the higher education you get in minimalism, without even having to work for it or concentrate on the fact that you are trying to get to a minimal state. You feel like when you are traveling, your old bad habits become non-existent, you're a completely different person, just everything magically falls into place. And I think this is a very dangerous concept when you are thinking about it from a minimalist point of view, because travel in itself cannot really solve anything. I think everyone can admit that if you are traveling only and you are not improving yourself otherwise, then travel doesn't really do much. You can go away to Rome to look at the sights, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your whole life will change. I think even if you are going away for months, it doesn't necessarily mean your real life, the life you left behind in order to travel, is gonna be better. I think you really have to change your mindset in order to improve your real life. I would say that I travel a normal amount, so I'm not like a travel geek. Travel is not my lifestyle goal, if you can say that. But I'm not a person either who doesn't travel at all. But currently I'm studying abroad and short-term and even long-term travel has been a lot of times on my mind. I think if you are going to a city, there are two ways to see it. If you have very little time, like 1 or 2 days, then you will have to have a very strict plan which sites or which areas you really want to see. And for example, if you go to Paris, you will see the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre. And if you include a little bit of walking around, you can probably do that in 1 or 2 days. But that is a time when you strategically know what you want to see and you just see it. If you have more than a couple of days, for example, when we first came to Paris 2 years ago, I think, we had 1 week or 8 days. And our plan was to just look at the map and pick a different area for each day. And therefore we could walk around, we really could discover that area. That is a bit more spontaneous way to see a city, but I really think that that way you are getting to know a lot more about the city than just driving around. You can find very interesting areas or small little streets that you find charming for some reason that wouldn't have been in the guidebook. But it doesn't matter how long the trip is, you always have the opportunity to fill your life with seemingly very useful and fulfilling activities and stuff. These are usually items that you in 1 or 2 weeks realize that were not necessary, but these objects are not fulfilling on the long term. And if you are traveling for a longer time, you might get homesick, and I can imagine that for that reason, you might try to comfort yourself with different objects and different activities that you wouldn't have otherwise wanted. You are just trying to comfort yourself and fill your life with something that is reliable and that is easily accessible for you. I think I have already mentioned this in my How to Improve Yourself Abroad video, but this idea applies here as well, that when you are abroad, you are kind of losing your goals that you had and you are losing your old habits. You are just basically losing your routine that you had back home. If you don't have a strategic plan on what to do and what not to do, then the situation might arise that you are trying to feel your life in other areas, especially if you are not conscious about it. And it is very easy to not notice what you are doing because you are abroad and you are in a blur, that you are a completely different person and you have totally new perspectives and nothing really matters that is back home. So you might as well buy a lot of things and just spend on everything that comes your way. You feel like that is your only chance to do that, because you are not always in Paris or you are not always in Rome, and at home you don't have that particular, I don't know, merry-go-round. That was just a stupid idea that came to me, but I think that illustrates the idea very well, that there is the illusion that just because you are abroad you have to do everything. And it is... Are you hearing the same things that I'm hearing right now? Just shouting at each other in French. So traveling, in my opinion, can shift your mindset enormous way, and therefore it is very hard to keep your minimalist ways. Just decide which activities and objects are really valuable to you. So for this reason, I was thinking about a mind trick that could help in these situations, and it is useful for me as well because here I am abroad. And I'm not saying this is very easy to implement, but you can look at it even as a little game. For example, you can, at the end of the day, just list all the objects and activities that were not useful and that you decided very wisely that are not useful, and just count all the amount of money that you saved by not doing those things. So that is quite motivating. But the mind trick that I was talking about. So before you purchase an opportunity for an experience, or you purchase a particular item, I think you should review, reevaluate, and reduce. It sounds very fancy, but it is simply just think through what you want to buy and what you don't want to buy. The reason why I chose these words, because it is a play on the reduce, reuse, recycle concept. If you know that, then yeah, I think that is funny. So the review part, in my opinion, is the first step, is that whenever you have the chance, you have to look at reviews for restaurants, for any particular products that you want to buy. It is very good to include this step, in my opinion, because first it elongates the purchasing process, and therefore you will have more time to think and maybe realize that you don't actually want that particular item. And secondly, you might realize a very rational reason not to buy. For example, when we first came to Paris, we made the mistake of going to a museum, canal museum, or I don't know how you would say that in French. Basically, you went underground and you looked at the plumbing of Paris. It is not a pleasant experience. It smells and it is dark, and you don't really get much from it, unless if you are particularly interested in the plumbing system of big cities. So I think if we had reviewed this particular experience, then we might have spared those 1 or 2 hours that we spent there, and it would have been a much nicer experience. So it is very important to first review. So the next thing is reevaluate, and that just means that you give yourself time to think through what you really want. The hardest part about this process or this mind trick is that it might seem it requires a lot of time, but it might be only that you think it requires a lot of time, and in truth it would only take 2 minutes to look at some reviews and reevaluate what you really want to do and what you don't want to do. And now that you have all your information and you thought through what you really want, you can decide if you want to reduce, so not buy that particular item, or opt for purchasing. And the main goal of this 3-step journey is not to reduce everything. I never say that. Minimalism should be more like essentialism, that it is not about reducing everything, taking everything down to the minimum. I think minimalism should be about including and implementing activities in your life that are valuable to you. So don't feel bad if you are opting for purchasing that particular item, if you really have gone through this process and you really thought through what you want. If it brings you happiness, then go for it. This whole 3-step trick is easier to do when you set a budget for yourself. So you really have limits very rationally you have set for yourself previously. In my experience, when you are abroad, souvenirs, the typical souvenirs, for example, this fridge magnet, are not the wisest things to purchase. I'm saying that because I was a huge fridge magnet addict when I was little, and everywhere we went, even when we went on a school trip to the countryside, I really wanted a fridge magnet. But now I'm a little bit wiser about these things, and I realize that owning fridge magnets, just putting a lot of stuff on your fridge is not very useful because it makes the fridge much harder to clean. That is a practical reason. The second reason is my problem with these fridge magnets is that they make the same ones in every country. They just put a different city name on the top. And to me that just feels not special anymore and just feels kind of cheap. And I think that if you want a souvenir from a city, you might get something that you otherwise would have got for yourself that is useful, that will remind you of that city. So the mindset that I use for souvenirs is I'm just trying to avoid the cheap, very similar looking ones that are everywhere in every city. I just wanted to share this thought process with you because it really has been a big journey for me. And I think I realized a lot of sides of travel while I'm studying abroad. My goal with this whole idea is to realize what matters and just avoid clutter and not fill up everything with clutter while traveling. And I think the coolest thing is, without these distractions, you might really get the feel of what a city actually means to you, and if you really like it without these distractions, what you really like in that city without these distractions. And this will be much more valuable to you than a fridge magnet over the years. I hope this video was interesting for occasional and for serial travelers as well. I just wanted to give a little bit of attention to this side of travel as well, because now everyone seems to be traveling, especially a lot of minimalists are getting minimalist to be able to travel around the world and just be free. But there are a lot of traps that you can fall into while traveling as a minimalist. If you have an opinion on this topic, I would love to hear it, because that is how we learn, that is how we improve, that we exchange ideas, and that is very cool that we can exchange these kinds of mindsets that are really improving and helping others. So I hope you will have a very nice day, and I'll see you tomorrow.